Hello and welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large, coming at you for show 1097 or something. I don't know, it's 100 and something or other. This show, of course, is brought to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, as well as here with video on YouTube. And this week, back for more abuse and nonsense. From me is my good friend and cult therapist, family therapist, Rachel Bernstein, who operates out of Los Angeles, California. And Rachel, thanks for being on the show.
You're very welcome. I'll try to keep the nonsense and abuse to a minimum.
Yeah, well, of course, that's more from my side, my end of things.
Okay,
you're always wonderful. You are always wonderful. It is great having you on, and you're definitely one of our favored guests here because we've done. I don't know. I think we've done some really good work with some of the shows that we've done, and so I thought we would tackle something this week that might be of interest to some people. I was in Minnesota this last week. I was doing a book signing and a little talk. And when I was putting that together, I was sort of thinking about this term that came up. And then I found out in talking about this that it's actually a really loaded term. There's a lot of baggage connected with this. And so I didn't end up using it in my talk. But it led me to talk to you. And then I realized we actually could do a show on this because this is out there and it's something that needs clarification. It needs to be talked about. It needs, and of course, in relation especially to cults and abusive relationships. And that is codependency. So first off, I guess, if anybody doesn't know who you are, well, go watch some of our earlier episodes because we've talked about your credentials. You're a licensed therapist there in LA, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so you're awesome. So what can you tell us first off, about this term codependency? I mean, it sounds simple. Sounds like, oh yeah, two people or more than two people, they're dependent on one another in a maybe not so great way. Maybe there's a relationship here where there's some abuse or there's some, dependency. But you take it away. What does all of this really mean?
Okay, well, first let me say I'm very glad that you're bringing this up because there are so many terms that are used and overused and wrongly used. So for you to be able to clarify is a very important thing to do so people feel that they're understood, but they also don't feel that they're being kind of misdiagnosed or pigeonholed really unfairly or grouped with other people who really have that disorder, which can so often happen. And it's going to be very sensitive for people who have been in situations where they have been pigeonholed or diagnosed or misdiagnosed. It's certainly going to raise a lot of emotion. So it's good that you're wanting to be careful about that, but also educate other people about being careful about it. So codependency is a fairly newer term, but it was used to describe not only a certain part of someone's personality, but the interplay between them and somebody else in terms of their relationship. And if it was a healthy, independent relationship, meaning both people had a chance to really be independent individuals who came together to have a relationship. Where that seems to break down is in a codependent relationship where people are not only dependent on each other for really everything, all emotional support or sometimes financial support, happiness, their identity, all of it, a real merging. But also it can break down where there is an uneven power differential where you have someone who takes control over someone else and makes them need them because they need to be needed in that way. And that's where it goes into being sometimes abusive, sometimes neglectful, like someone who will, buy alcohol for their alcoholic partner. How much of that is, right, being supportive, and how much of that is really being neglectful and not willing to kind of create that moment of tension. So codependency is often used with the word enabler or enabling.
I was about to mention that from the example
Yeah.
you just gave. Yeah, I was going to ask about what's that, how does that fit into it?
Yeah. So when you have someone who enables someone else, sometimes it's done for a very negative, controlling reason because, again, they need that person to be dependent on them. But sometimes people who are really worried about having tension or who are conflict avoidant or very fearful because they were raised in environments with a lot of conflict, they'll do everything to keep everyone happy, which might not be the best thing for that relationship, might not be the best thing for that other person. And so they might enable that person. I guess I'm pointing out that it can come from a good place or a fearful place or a controlling place. But the end result is that you have a behavior that eases the tension in the relationship. So you have someone who's constantly bailing out a loved one who keeps winding up in jail. Someone who is always coming to the rescue, needing for there to be that very short-term gratification and an easing of that moment of potential conflict. And then the other person can get dependent on them for doing this.
Right. And that was, I'm wondering, you mentioned different intentions can underlie why a person would act as an enabler or as, in this way. Do you think in the end, the intention really matters a whole lot if the result is kind of the same in terms of somebody going out, for example, when you said going out and buying alcohol for an alcoholic? Does that, I mean, I think maybe I'm asking because I'm wondering, just diving right into this here, do we want to give that a pass if the intentions are good, or how do we want to deal with that? You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. If the end result is that you're lighting the cigarette for your friend who has emphysema. Right. I mean, I've seen that. My office is right next door to a hospital, and I see some wonderful supportive behaviors and I see some enabling behaviors, and I'm not going to judge any of it. You have to understand it in context. But you're right, at the end of the day, it's really hurting the other person, and you're hurting yourself too because you're participating in what turns out to be kind of irresponsible or not healthy behavior. Where I make a distinction is in how treatable the situation is. If someone's doing it because they're conflict avoidant, we can work with that. And we can also have them see that sometimes there's going to be a conflict if they say no, or sometimes they're just so worried about it happening that they'll never say no. So they don't know that actually it can work out better than they thought, which happens in a lot of situations that we've talked about in the past, in cultic situations. You don't want to take the risk. But I do think that there are times that it is, if you notice that it's something insidious, that someone is really trying to control the other person and handicapping them, keeping them from, I'll give an example of a parent I know who didn't have their child go to their college entrance exam because they had a little bit of a headache that day. So they wanted to kind of take care of them. But really, what they were hoping...
The child was the one with the headache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a little bit of a headache. They wanted to go home, take them home, and give them soup, take care of them. But really, the message was, I don't want you to be independent from me. I don't want you to move out. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of you having your own life, and if you get into college, will you ever come back? And so that's really quite destructive, and that can come across in a very selfless giving way, but it's really selfish and needy at its core.
Right.
And that's a little harder to deal with than just the person who doesn't want there to be tension that day.
Right, the conflict-averse person. Yeah, because there's a neediness, and this is, I think, how I was originally approaching it, was the narcissist, the person who is trying to subvert the will of someone else through kindness or actions that might be looked at as trying to help the person, but really what they're trying to do is subjugate the person in some fashion.
Exactly. So with the narcissistic relationship, and I use the term relationship in quotes because the narcissist doesn't have relationships, but when they're with someone, they either have zeroed in on the person who they know they can get to be dependent on them, or they create that in the other person so that the other person feels they can't live without them, can't make a decision without them, and they'll reinforce that by saying, thank goodness I was here to help you through this moment, or thank goodness I helped you decide this, or you would have made a mistake on your own. That's certainly a pathology. That's much harder to treat, sometimes even impossible to treat. It's better for the person to leave that situation.
I was just trying to figure out, in terms of, if you look at the spectrum of codependent relationships, how many of these things fall into that category of the narcissistic subjugation versus the well-intentioned but conflict-averse person who just can't deal and so is enabling this person, whether it's through alcohol, drugs, or gambling, or whatever it is that is this person's weakness that they are, enabling?
It's usually not nefarious. It's usually not in that kind of psychosis, that very severe narcissistic relationship. You find more people who are kind of supporting each other's bad behavior or low achievement or immature behavior, or kind of laughing off when their spouse says, it makes an inappropriate joke. It's cringeworthy, but they just don't want to have a fight. So it usually comes in that kind of form. And so, again, it's something that is more easily treatable if people want to have it treated. Where I've noticed it's become an issue is where it's been wildly misdiagnosed or overdiagnosed.
I was going to ask you about that.
Okay, so what I have noticed is that there are some parents, some spouses, some best friends, others, who have been told that they're being codependent when in actuality they're just being responsible or they're being protective. And if they didn't do what they were doing, it would actually be negligent. But that's the problem with these terms being used in this way. And also the 12-step model uses this term and overuses this term, I think, at times. So if you have, let's say, a child who is suicidal and you're up all night doing a suicide watch, are you being codependent? I'm thinking not.
Right.
Right? Because there is, once you assess the situation, if this is not something that happens every night, if let's say this was the first time or just one of two times, there's a real potential for danger. And so you actually have to act in a different way. You have to be more on top of it. The situation calls for it and calls for the necessity for it. But in most of these situations, there isn't that kind of danger. I just worry because sometimes people are made to feel like they're being criticized for doing something that actually is the right idea. I remember from hearing from people who sent their teenagers to treatment centers, parents would walk in and they said it was like having someone greet them like this, hi, my name is Dr. So-and-so, you're codependent, and what's your name?
Wow.
I haven't even sat down yet, and you haven't met my kid, and you haven't met me, but that was sort of the idea, that if you have a teenager who has issues, it must be because you're a codependent parent. Just like with any diagnosis, you have to know the situation, you have to know the people, and so sometimes people's hands are tied, and they're kept from doing what they really should be doing in that situation. That's why it's so important to use these terms well and to use these terms wisely.
Exactly. And that is something that we seem to just fall down on over and over and over again. I was going to say, it's a shame that it can't be such a black and white simple issue. We have to think. damn it, because and this sounds like a kind of a very context sensitive matter. It really does. You really do have to have a good look at the situation and the relationship, and what if you think from the outside that it's an enabling relationship, well, you better dig in and get the details.
Exactly right. And also, who's causing it? Sometimes you don't know if it's something that someone has come into the relationship feeling about themselves, or it's something that was engendered by the other person or fostered by the other person. I know people who are codependent because they have fear of abandonment. They are so afraid of being alone, so they need to have that person need them. But I also know people who are codependent, or become codependent because the person that they're with has done gaslighting and has made them feel like they can't function without them. So, again, it's about the intention and the root where it's coming from.
Yeah, that gaslighting can be rough, because you're in a situation where you're actually a functioning individual, and then suddenly you're not, or you feel like you're not, because here you have this person, and this is again that sort of more going in the direction of that narcissistic relationship, or at least maybe we could just call it a damaging relationship or something. I mean, it doesn't, I don't know that it has to even be a narcissist textbook case for the person to gaslight you,
Right.
or to, make you feel less. In Scientology, we call it the suppressive person, right? They're suppressing you, and it's not entirely horrible language if it's used, in that context.
Right.
That is how you feel. You feel suppressed. You feel like somebody's sitting on your head all the time.
Right.
I have a little bit of experience with that. So. Yeah. So, and unfortunately, too many people do. With that. Now, how does this codependency? Let's talk about cults for a second. In my talk, I discussed the idea of cults. I separated it from belief. I'm really going to be moving a lot more when I'm talking about this. I'm going to be moving much more in that direction, because there's a lot of confusion with cults and people judging oddball beliefs as, okay, well, that's obviously a cult. And no, that actually has nothing to do with it. It's the symbiotic but abusive relationship is how I'm sort of describing it. How does codependency fit into that model, or how would you talk about that or describe that?
Right. So within a cultic environment, you have a codependent relationship between the leader and the followers, because you're right, it's not about the belief, it's about the nature of that relationship. And sometimes people will get drawn into a system like a cult and feel very good about the fact that they have the answers now, or they don't have to worry, and they can actually depend on the people around them to keep themselves safe. Or now they can depend on God, who they feel that they have a renewed or a new relationship with, who's going to make sure that they're safe even if they're walking down a dark alley, which I've seen happen, where people test out just how safe they're going to be kept in a cult. And so that is either that they came into it having that kind of dependent personality, wanting to give over to something else or someone else, because they didn't feel secure, they didn't feel confident, they were kind of basing their own value on how happy they can make another person rather than make themselves. It's all about the other. So that they came into it like that. What also happens is that there are some strong people who don't really have dependency issues, who are made to be completely dependent when they go into a cult. And they're broken down over time, made to feel that they can't rely on the evidence of their own senses, they can't rely on their intuition, they can't rely on their inner voice, can't rely on their family, anyone else who might be outside of the group. And so they then have this manufactured dependency over time that becomes part of who they are while they're there. And it lingers, actually, once they leave, and they have to relearn how to not be dependent in that way, and how to actually turn inward and be dependent on themselves and develop a sense of confidence that they can be because they were before. But so we don't know sometimes if someone had it beforehand or if it was manufactured once they're in. But what we do know is that the cult leader has just as much of a need and just as much dependency as the dependency that he or she creates or manufactures or exaggerates and increases in its members, because they need to be worshipped, listened to, believed, seen as magical, higher than other human beings, whatever it is.
Right.
That is an unmistakable need that was not necessarily crafted by being in the group. That's something usually, for the most part, that they came into their position already having, and that's why they took on that position. Very few examples do exist, though, of people who were raised in cults who then became the leader. And so we don't know what they would have been like to begin with, if they would have been the same, or if it was manufactured in them. But the cult leader needs for you to need him, needs for you to love her, needs whatever it is, but 100%, without fail, without question. And so they can't exist without the interchange, without the interplay, without the audience, without the adoration.
Right. That was actually the subject of that Paul Thomas Anderson movie called The Master. I've been asked about that movie a few times as far as the Scientology content, and yeah, that movie is very weird because it is 100% Scientology. But the whole point of the movie was not to rag on Scientology. The point was that it was a great way to look into that codependency and explore that kind of relationship. At least that's what, PTA was talking about in interviews and whatnot when he talked about the movie. And he certainly did get his Scientology right as far as making that movie. But I think he took such care because he knew that that was a really great example of,
right.
You have L. Ron Hubbard as the cult leader, or now David Miscavige. But, that power hunger, that need or obsession to free people, to be the savior for people, to feed on that energy that you get from those people, is just as much there as drives that purpose to subjugate or fool or manipulate people so that they will follow you, right? They will follow that leader, right? Exactly. Like, why would they do that? Because they know they can't do it any other way.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is usually cult leaders don't have day jobs,
Right.
So this is what they have. They have these abilities to kind of be these parasitic people. They live off of the devotion or the money or whatever else they get, just the sacrifices people are willing to make for them and all of that. But if you don't have enough evidence, just watching how people listen to every word that a cult leader says to understand or to watch the dependency, just notice how much people are made to feel fearful of leaving. If someone doesn't want you to be endlessly dependent on them, and they don't care if you're endlessly dependent, they also don't care if you leave.
That's right. In fact, that actually brings something to mind. I have, give a lot of, well, I'll just say this. The last time I was single, I was single for a while, and I really developed an okayness with that. Okay, I am really good. I'm I don't need another person in my life because I feel like I'm got this hole in me that I must fill, and it's this that's kind of that need sort of thing. I'm not trying to judge other people. I'm just giving myself up as an example here of building a stable life where I was happy, settled, good schedule, good life. Everything was fine. I had interests. I had friends. I have, everything's going along fine. And it was at that point that I knew it was okay to bring another person in. And I wanted them to be just as stable and self-sufficient and able to be by themselves and have their own life. But now we're going to share our lives. And that's, I think, a much healthier approach than relationships I've had in the past, and I think other people have had in the past, where they feel, this Tom Cruise, you complete me thing, right? And, it sounds romantic, it's beautiful, it's Hollywood, it's all that. But if you need somebody else to complete you, I'd say maybe in the real world, outside of Hollywood and the rom-coms, I'd say maybe some self-examination might be in order, and maybe some self-building might be in order, to get yourself kind of stably on your own 2 feet. I don't know. What do you're a family counselor and relationship counselor. What do you think about all that?
So, the expression, you do you. So that is an awesome expression. And that's how it should be. That's how it should be in a relationship. We are together. We like each other or love each other, whatever the level of the relationship is. We want to be together. We look for opportunities to be together. We support each other in what we do. We bring out the best in each other. But you do your thing, I do my thing. Even if, let's say, we work together, still, you can have your outside activities, go to the gym, do your thing, have privacy. I'm not going to check your emails and your texts, right?
Yeah.
You have your life. You had your life beforehand. I don't want to take that away. I want to invite you to share life with me, but I don't want to undercut what you've developed and what you still can develop for yourself in your life. That's healthy. That does not exist in cults.
Exactly. In a cult of any size, whether it's 2 or 2 million.
Exactly right. And so you have with the narcissist, they get mad if you pet the dog before you greet them. I mean, they're going to be jealous of everything and everyone, right?
Yep.
There are certain signs to watch out for. But I think that if you know that you come into something having the right to maintain what makes you happy and maintain your equilibrium, which means how much time off you get, how much sleep you get, how much time you need just to be on your own without talking to anyone, without having to justify it, explain it, or apologize for that, then it's healthy. But as soon as you're having to explain yourself, or you're having to undercut what you know is healthy for you in order to please another person, or if you not even just to blame the other person, if you know about yourself that as soon as you jump into a relationship, you are totally 100% focused on the other to your own detriment. Yep. And you see this with certain people in relationships where one person looks awesome and the other one is like haggard and they haven't brushed their hair. And, sometimes you think one person is doing it to the other person, but they're kind of sometimes doing it to themselves. Like they walk up thinking, what does this other person need? Because they need to be needed. It's good to sort of figure out what makes you tick and if you know how to behave in a healthy way before you get into a relationship.
Big time. Yeah, I think these are really key pieces of relationship advice for sure. But apply just as equally if we're going to expand the conversation out. Apply just as much to your personal relationship with any group you're going to get involved in. That codependency business applies just as much. If you feel like you have to immerse yourself in this group, or the group is putting demands on you that you immerse yourself in the group because that's the only way you can succeed, be happy, achieve a goal, whatever the statement is, maybe not.
Right.
Maybe we should look a little bit more closely at this.
Exactly. And then I understand why people put in a situation where they need to suppress themselves and give over everything to someone else, how and why they're going to bristle at the term codependent being applied to them. Because if you're told that unless you do that, unless you make yourself this sacrificial lamb for the cause, you're not going to have a relationship with God, or you're not going to be able to have success or happiness or be healthy or keep your mother alive because the psychic told you that that's the only way to keep your mother alive. And then on top of it, to be labeled as codependent, like, really? Thanks. This was not necessarily my choice. I was completely manipulated into feeling like I didn't have a choice but to be this way. This shouldn't be on me. This isn't my diagnosis. I don't want to be grouped with the cult leader. I don't want to be grouped with the psychic. I don't want to be grouped with the narcissist. They're the ones who have the need. They're the ones who did this to me.
Brilliant. And also brings up a good point, which is that these kind of labels are only as helpful as they're helping someone. I mean, we use these terms, but if it's not helpful, like you're talking about, this person is like, oh, now you're going to call me codependent. Thanks. That's not moving the ball down the road for me at all. Right? That's not doing it for me here, right?
Right.
So, I think we should keep that in mind when we're throwing this stuff around. It's sure, you can call somebody's group a cult, but if telling them that isn't going to help them realize what's going on, or isn't going to assist somehow, don't bother doing it. Don't even go there. Just figure out some other way to communicate. And
I think codependency is a helpful term, as you've said and as we've said, for certain situations, and it can really help someone understand that they're involved in something they might want to really look at, and they might want to get some help with if it's interfering in their life or the life of the person that they're dependent upon, or who they've engendered dependency on them. But I think so much of what happens within cults is that terms are bandied about. And I know, like in large group awareness trainings, almost everyone in the room is labeled a victim. Right? That you're the victim of everything that's ever happened to you. You're the victim of being sexually abused, and that you have to sit in the victim chair or the victim row, or and so I think it just is a way to kind of control the people there, control the masses, and make them look inward, as opposed to really being able to point the finger outward and say, wait, no, this happened to me. Why am I being diagnosed as something wrong with me? When that happens, when you go in to get some treatment for something, and you find that all the attention is now being placed back on you, that's a control mechanism. That's a way to make you feel like you're the one who has the problem here. You don't really have a right to be angry. Somehow you brought that in. That's energy you brought in, you brought to you, you let in. There's always that term in cults, right? In Scientology too.
Oh yeah, pulled it in.
Right. And that it's a way to assure that you're then going to sign up for more workshops to get help with that, and sign up for more classes to get help with that, and look downward on yourself and then need help with that and pay more money and whatever. It's a way to create more dependency.
Right. And I don't think we need any more of that in the world.
No.
How do, we talked a bit about this, but how do people deal with this? I mean, let's say you do have you got codependency, you labeled it, you nailed it, the person agrees, it's a situation. What do you as a therapist do, in general terms, of course, because I know every case is unique and different, to empower a person and get them to build themselves back up so they can deal with that and not fall into another, codependent relationship or situation?
Well, if the codependency is because you just want to make sure that everyone's happy with you, then sometimes the help that you can provide someone is helping them find a sense of their rights, and helping them find their voice, and having them practice it. Maybe not with that person and not in a tense situation, but with other people where it's safe, and you do some role playing so they can get over their worry about living through those moments of tension. and that sometimes they might have a bad experience that they're applying to that because bad things happened in the past when there were tense moments, but doesn't mean it's going to happen again. If someone's codependent because they don't want to be alone and they need someone to need them, then I think what they need to be able to do is they need to be able to address that and see how that might actually be keeping someone else from living their life, and keeping someone else from then really showing them how much they care by letting them do their thing and then choosing to come back and have them in their life. If you keep someone sequestered, then you don't know if it's their choice to stay or not. And it feels so much more satisfying to have, let's say, a kid who moves out but calls you, how you doing? Or do you want to get together for lunch? That's amazing, as opposed to being stuck in their bedroom until they're 47, right? And so I think the other part is that you want someone to have a sense that what they're feeling is okay. It came from kind of an okay place, that they really do want to be able to take care and they want someone to need them, and caretakers are kind of like that. But you want them to not apply that in a way that keeps them from being able to make good decisions in their own life. And I know this might sound funny, but I'll tell people to get a puppy, right? Like have some way to have that connection, get that energy out, take care of kids, do whatever you need to do, but let your loved ones be, and have a more defined sense of where you end and another person begins. And that really, you need to switch codependency for respect. Because when you're developing that codependent relationship, you're ultimately treating someone with a lack of respect. That's a hard thing to realize, but it's true.
Wow. Great points. Really great points. I think that's actually a little self-realization here, because, sometimes it takes the exact right wording before some things twig or click. And when you just said that business about wanting everybody around you to be happy as a form of codependency, I immediately thought of myself when I was in Scientology, because that was my mindset almost the entire time I was in the Sea Org. I was there to make other people happy and pleased, and
right.
That's
but
interesting.
That's also. I'm glad you brought that up, because that also brings up this other kind of permutation, which is that sometimes it's situationally based. Same thing with other diagnoses. Sometimes people have clinical depression. Sometimes they have situational depression. You can have codependency or a dependent personality disorder, or you can have situational dependent personality disorder. You knew that unless people were happy with you, your life was going to be miserable.
Big time. And that was the internal pressure that drove me. This is so funny. Yeah. I did not start this show at all looking at anything connected with my life. I just wanted to talk about the subject of this in relation to cults. But of course, we start getting into this, and I can't help but bring up examples from my past. And that was squarely where I lived. And it took many years before I finally realized, wait a minute, no one is codependent on me. No one's turning this around. No one's making sure I'm happy.
Wow.
And that was one of those light bulb moments for me near the end. I realized I was telling lies. I realized it was all about money, but I also realized I was helping the hell out of people, and no one was going to help me. And that was a thing. That was a thing.
Exactly. So that's a very important moment of reflection, because you're going to be so busy doing and pleasing and fixing and anticipating that you're not going to be thinking about what you're receiving or what you're not receiving.
That's right.
And how there isn't equality in those relationships and in that environment. Same thing with a dependent personality. You're gonna need to be either the giving one, the caring one, and it's not going to be about what you get back. And that should matter. It really should matter.
Yeah.
It's also a way to have you really take note if the people around you are taking advantage of your good nature or your generosity, or that you're breaking your back to please. And do you matter in that situation? It's really an important moment to take stock.
Big time. Big time. Well, Rachel, this was really great. This is going to be a little bit shorter of an episode than usual, but I think we've covered the key points I wanted to hit on with this, and what spurred me to talk with you about this in the first place. I know there's a lot of other things we could get into as far as how this is misimplemented or mislabeled, and I know that it's almost with some people that I've spoken with about this, it's almost loaded language. You mentioned codependency, and there's so much because there's been mislabeling or in their particular circumstance, and they just I just want to, don't talk to me about that. So I know that there's more to the discussion, but I thought if we focused in first on what it really is, how it really works, on a one-on-one, on a cult basis, on a group basis, and then got into some of these examples of how it's not necessarily codependency in all circumstances, we might be able to give people a little codependency 101 here.
I think it's a great thing, and I think to empower people to look it up themselves. And it's always safer if you diagnose yourself based on not just what you hear people calling you, but look it up, read a book, watch a video, read articles about it, see if it fits you. But when you start diagnosing other people and telling them what's wrong with them, then of course they're going to have a reaction. Or if they have a dependent personality, they'll accept your diagnosis way too quickly. So that's why it's best if it comes from an internal place. And cult members are going to be so sick and tired of being told what's wrong with them. So you always want to be mindful of not jumping to the diagnosis.
Big time. Great advice. All right, Rachel. Well, thank you very much. And we'll wrap up now on this one, but I am sure we will be getting together again soon to discuss more of this stuff. And anybody out there, please do take this advice. Now, also, just to plug you, because I always shamelessly should do that, how does anybody find you, find out how to contact you, that sort of thing?
Okay, so you can check me out through our videos and on my YouTube channel and rachelbernsteintherapy.com. You can email me at rbpsychology@gmail.com or give me a call, 818-907-0036, and we'll talk.
Beautiful. All right, great. Well, thanks, Rachel. And to everybody watching, please leave your comments, your feedback, your thoughts and ideas about all of this, and any experience you've had with it, good, bad, or sideways, right?
Yeah.
We'd both be very interested in seeing that. And so go ahead and leave that in the notes section below or at sensiblyspeaking.com. And I will check that out. Also, go ahead and please like and share this podcast around the interwebs. It is always helpful if we can get this stuff out there so that people who need this help can get it. All right. Thanks for coming around, folks. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.